Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Saturday, everybody. Hope your day and your weekend are off to a fantastic start. Got a new day, which of course means a new NBA player prop video to share with you guys. But first, as always, people, please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. It helps the channel grow, and it really does mean a ton to us. With a new day comes some new opportunities to go ahead and make some money. I have 4 NBA player props to go ahead and share with you guys in today's NBA slate. But first, before we dive into today's picks, a quick little recap of how we did last night. And guys, we were so close to cashing last night's Freaky Friday 5-leg parlay. Ironically, the one with the highest odds, Karl-Anthony Towns, which was minus 300 when we finished recording, is what did us in the end of the day. He got in some pretty bad foul trouble, had 3 fouls pretty early in the first half, and it just kind of screwed us. I think he finished with 14 points plus. He had like barely any assists. Was a clear loss. I mean, honestly, even in the minutes that he did play, didn't play a ton of minutes, he did have 16 shot attempts. He just shot 6 for 16 from the floor. So just an all-around miss there on Karl-Anthony Towns, but the other 4 player props did hit. So for those who do kind of pick and choose what you like, if you did take some of these player props and added them to your parlay and you won, congratulations. But we did obviously miss the mark just ever so slightly on yesterday's 5-leg parlay. But that's A-okay because we got a new day today, some fresh new player props, and like I already said, some new opportunities to go ahead and make some money. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's NBA picks. All right, guys, jumping right into the outlier screen. Our first player prop in today's slate comes from the Pacers-Thunder game, 8 p.m. tip-off. We're going Jalen Williams of the Oklahoma City Thunder over 19.5 points, which we're getting for minus 125 over on DraftKings. It is available on multiple sports books for varying odds. As always, guys, make sure to go ahead and shop around for the best sports book odds available. It's very important, especially when it comes to finding the value in player props. Now, the data is pretty solid on this player prop, although I should go ahead and tell you guys, this is only his second game back returning from injury. He did play the other night on March 27th. He did cash the over with 20 points against the Grizzlies. This line's a little lower, probably due to the fact that he's coming off an injury and whatnot, but honestly, it's not too far off. His normal line would probably be like 20.5, 21.5, somewhere in that ballpark, so not too far off where he would normally be listed as. But the data is solid, and he's got a pretty good matchup here against the Indiana Pacers. 8 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the over, averaging 23 points per game over his last 10 games. So far this season, a 60% hit rate on this over for Jalen Williams, 38 out of 63 games played. He's cashed the over, averaging 21.21 points per game this year. So we just need him to hit his average, and we should go ahead and have a cash in our hands. Even if you want to go look at the last 20 game data for him, 14 of his last 20 games, he's cashed the over, averaging 22.5 points per game over his last 20 games. And he hovers right around, even when you see some of these misses here, 18 points, 18 points, 18 points. He's generally always in the vicinity of this line, which I think is obviously a pretty good sign coming into this matchup here. We also have the head-to-head data, very small sample size. He has played Indiana once this year. He barely cashed the over with 20 points in that game, but he did cash the over. And honestly, he finished with 20 points, but he probably could have had a lot more. He did take 22 shots in that game, had a bit of a rush shooting performance, 8 for 22, just 36% from the floor. So what that does tell me is that although he did cash it, so we did have a cash, he had way more opportunities to put up even more numbers, which does give me some encouragement coming into this player prop matchup. We also have the insights provided by Outlier. Jalen Williams has exceeded 19.5 points in 8 of his last 9 games, averaging 23.6 points per game over his last 9 games. That is an 89% hit rate over his last 9. So like I said, some pretty good numbers there. Looking at the defensive matchup versus shooting guards this year, the Pacers 20th in points allowed to the shooting guard position. Now, Jalen Williams also plays some time at the small forward position. Now, the Pacers rank way better defensively against the 3 spot than they do the 2 guard spot. That being said, Benedict Mathurin is out tonight with an injury, who obviously is one of their better players. He is one of the big reasons why they defend so well against the small forward position. Him being out is a huge advantage here for Jalen Williams in this matchup. And again, he did catch it last time, so I'm not too concerned. And honestly, their recent numbers, the Pacers rank pretty well defensively recently also. But take a look at who also, by the way, cool new thing Outlier is providing for us here. It's the recent kind of performances against position, which obviously is a really good stat to go ahead and throw in there. Shout out to Outlier. Link down below, 7-day free trial to go ahead and check it out for yourself. They're always adding new upgrades and stuff to the website, which is obviously one of the better features of Outlier, is they're constantly adding new things. So we have points versus Indiana per position here. The recent numbers look pretty good, but look at who they're playing. I mean, Justin Champagne, Chris Middleton, LeBron, first game off of return from injury, Maxwell Lewis, Zaire Williams, Kessler Edwards, Najee Marshall. Like, yeah, they have you see a lot of them are missing their numbers, although some of them did hit their lines. They're playing a bunch of, I don't want to say scrubs, because obviously if I played these guys, they'd wash me. But lower tier NBA players. So I'm not too concerned about the defensive thing there. Obviously, Mathurin being out is a huge plus. Jalen Williams, the biggest risk for me is the fact that it's his second game back from injury. He did play almost 30 minutes the other night, so I'm not, I'm a little concerned. Obviously, he's still fresh off an injury, but he did play a healthy amount of minutes there last time out, just a couple of days ago. And he did take a healthy number of shots, 12 shots, shot 6 for 12. It was a blowout game. I should hope that he would do a little bit more this time, but we'll go ahead and see. But I think it's a solid player prop to go ahead and tail here. All right, guys, on our second player prop in today's slate, we're actually sticking with the same game and same team. We're going Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder over 44.5 points plus rebounds plus assists, which we're getting for -130 over on DraftKings. Now, the recent data, this line is obviously very high. The recent data seems to be pretty strong. The overall data is not as strong. You do see 7 of his last 10 games, SGA has cashed this over, averaging 45.7 points plus rebounds plus assists per game over his last 10 games. Even if you want to go ahead and stretch the data out to the last 20 games, still pretty solid, 55% hit rate, averaging 45.1 points, rebounds, assists per game over his last 20 games. Now, like I mentioned, go ahead and stretch the numbers out to the entire season view for SGA. Just a 42% hit rate on the over. 30 out of 71 games, he's cashed this line, averaging 43.96 PRAs per game this year. Again, that number, not the best number, but, obviously this is a very high line, probably a little elevated due to circumstance and situation and matchup here with the Indiana Pacers. Speaking of the Pacers, head-to-head matchup, each of the last 2 times he's faced off with Indiana, he's cashed the over. He's averaging 52.5 PRAs per game across those last 2 matchups with the Pacers. They have played, obviously, that one time this year back on December 26th. SGA had a massive performance. 45.7 rebounds and 8 assists, and what was a pretty narrow win for the Thunder. So if he could do that again, that'd be great. The Pacers overall defensively, they're not the worst team, but they're not a great team either. 19th, and 13th there, points, rebounds, assists, respectively. So again, not the worst team defensively, but not a great team either. Versus point guards, they do rank pretty well overall, although we have seen some superstar point guards really have field days playing this Pacers team. They're 19th in points, 24th in assists, and 6th in rebounds overall allowed to point guards. Now, scrolling down to that new feature we talked about where, you have the recent performances. Look at point guards and this is again in the points, rebounds, assists category. Point guards have had a lot of success when facing off with Indiana. You have Carlton Carrington cashing his line. Obviously, his line only 20.5. But the only point guard was Gabe Vincent, who's obviously a backup point guard, failed to cash his line. But Luka, obviously massive game, had 48 points, rebounds, assists just a couple days ago. Mike Conley cashed his line. D'Angelo Russell cashed his line. Spencer Dinwiddie cashed his line. Again, they're all varying numbers, but Luka's pretty comparable. Actually, the line was 45.5, which is actually a little higher than what we have SGA, and he cashed the line. So I do think SGA, if Luka can do it against this team, he should be able to too. The recent data seems to suggest that Indiana defensive versus point guards not doing the best. So I do like SGA here, -130 odds too. Pretty strong value in this spot. All right, guys, we have 2 player props left in today's slate. Before we continue and finish up today's video, obviously, if you guys are still watching this point in today's video, I appreciate you guys and put a lot of hard work into each and every single video. So those who do watch all the way through, we really do appreciate you guys. If you are still watching as we approach the 9-minute mark in today's video, go ahead and comment 9 down below just to let me know who's watching, who's writing, who's supporting. We do appreciate it. Even if you are just here for the picks and you don't want to listen to the analysis, I get it, but I do appreciate those a little extra, those people who do stick around and watch through everything. So appreciate you guys. Comment 9 down below, and let's finish up these picks. All right, guys, our third player prop in today's NBA slate. We're moving on to Celtics Spurs, 8 p.m. tip-off. We're going Derek White of the Celtics over 18.5 points plus assists, which we're getting for -125 over on DraftKings. Data is really, really strong on this player prop, and honestly, for as good as the data is, you would expect this to be an alternate line. So -125, or even it says -130 also. Both really strong value here. Derek White's cashed this in 7 of his last 10 games, a 70% hit rate, averaging 21.7 points plus assists per game over his last 10 games. Go ahead and stretch the data out to the last 20 games. Still very solid numbers. 80% hit rate. 16 of his last 20 games, he's cashed the over, averaging 23.05 points plus assists per game over his last 20 games. And take a look at some of the misses here for Derek White. They're very narrow misses. You see 18 points plus assists versus Philly back on February 20th. 18 points plus assists back on March 6th versus Philly. 17 points plus assists against the Lakers back on March 8th. The only miss where he was clearly off was March 21st versus Utah, blowout win in favor of the Celtics, where he had 11 points and 4 assists in that game. But overall, some really good numbers here for Derek White over the last 20 games. If you go ahead and expand the scope to the entire season view, it's really solid. 74% hit rate this year for Derek White, 51 out of 69 games. Pause for applause. He's cashed the over, averaging 21.06 points plus assists per game overall this year. Now, obviously, the biggest risk here is minutes played because the Spurs, kind of a tanking team at this point, with De'Aaron Fox and Wembanyama both out for the season. So minutes and the potential of a blowout, definitely some risk there. But this is kind of a revenge game. No, I don't want to say revenge game, but a return game for Derek White. He's played the Spurs a few times now since being traded to Boston. But obviously in San Antonio against his former team, it obviously means a little extra for Derek White when he plays the Spurs, especially in San Antonio, where he kind of started his career and made a name for himself. The head-to-head data, each of the last 2 times he's faced off with San Antonio, including the one time they played this year back on February 12th, he's cashed the over. He's averaging 25 points plus assists per game across those last 2 matchups with the Spurs. So all that's in our favor. We also have the insights provided by Outlier. Derek White, again, has exceeded 19.5 points plus assists in 7 of his last 8 games. We are getting it, again, at 18.5. So, we already kind of talked about that. He's on a pretty good recent run here. Overall, the Spurs, not a very good defensive team. Bottom 10 in both points and assists allowed overall versus shooting guards, 14th in points, 22nd in assists. However, if you do go ahead and narrow the data down to the last 7 or 10 games, the Spurs are bottom 10 in both of those categories. And looking at sort of some similar players and positions and performances versus the Spurs, Donovan Mitchell, obviously in their last time out versus San Antonio, had a really good performance. Even their bench guards all had really good games. Detroit, Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, they all cashed their line. Jacoby Walter with the Raptors, the last time they played, cashed their line. So shooting guards have had a good amount of success when playing the Spurs. Some of the guys who are missing, though, Jared Butler, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Lonnie Walker, we're talking about bench guys who are missing their line, but Austin Reeves cashed it, Quentin Grimes cashed it. The starters are cashing it. It's the bench guys who are coming short in their line. So it seems like a pretty good spot here to go ahead and tail Derek White. And our fourth and final player prop in today's slate comes from the Lakers-Grizzlies game, 8 p.m. tip-off. And I feel cheap just keep going back to the Luka Doncic well. But he's just so fun to bet on, and he produces results. So we're going Luka here over 30.5 points, which we're getting for minus 110 on FanDuel. It is available on many sports books for varying odds. And again, the recent data is pretty solid. 7 of his last 10 games, he's cashed the over. He's averaging 31.1 points per game over his last 10 games. Now, the overall numbers for the season, not great. 43% hit rate. 18 out of 42 games, he's cashed the line, averaging 27.81 points per game this year. But a lot of factors to consider: injuries, different teams, changing teams mid-season. The important thing is that over the last 10 games, he's really gotten comfortable in LA and had some really, really strong scoring performances. Now, another reason why I love this player prop is the head-to-head data. You do see each of his last 4 matchups against the Memphis Grizzlies, he's cashed the over. It's a 100% hit rate over their last 4 meetings, averaging 34.5 points per game over their last 4 matchups. He did play them once this year with the Mavericks back on December 30th, 37 points in that game. He consistently scores around 35 points per game when he plays this Grizzlies defense. The Grizzlies just fired their head coach in a shocking move, so they're kind of in a little bit of disarray right now. The overall bottom 5 defense overall in points allowed versus point guards, they actually rank overall pretty well. However, if you were to go ahead and narrow it down to the last 7 games, the Grizzlies' 6th worst defense in the NBA in terms of points allowed to point guards. And you can kind of go ahead and see this down below. SGA had a really solid performance. Isaiah Collier, even Chris Dunn cashing his line. James Harden had a pretty big game. Ben Simmons with 0. I mean, what happened to Ben Simmons? I know there's been countless videos and countless discussions around it, but what happened to this guy? I mean, his line was only set at 2.5 points, to be fair, but Jesus Christ, this guy was supposed to be the next LeBron, and ouch. But yeah, you see some of the starting point guards have been successful. It's worth considering when looking at this. As much as I like this data point, we do have to keep into mind, you look at the odds here. These are some of the more favorable lines, but also it takes into consideration bench players as well, Chris Dunn, although in that game maybe James Harden played. So, Chris Dunn, Ben Simmons, bench players, Davion Mitchell, bench player. So That's worth considering when looking at this data point, but it still shows SGA, really good game. Isaiah Collier, who was a starter, really good game. James Harden, starter, really good game. So some pretty good numbers. Although actually, I think Keontae George might have been the starter in that one. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. It shows starters and bench players, but the starters consistently have been playing pretty well over the last 7 games. Again, the Grizzlies bottom 6 in points allowed to point guard. So I think it's a pretty good spot. And Ja Morant is not playing 100% healthy if he even plays at all. He's a game time decision with the left hamstring strain. So even if he does play, could be in our favor. And also on the Lakers side of things, Austin Reeves game time decisions, which could help Luka get even more touches and more shot attempts. So I think it's a pretty good player prop across the board here. All right, guys, those are all 4 picks in today's NBA slate. As always, thank you very much for watching one more time. Please make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and drop a comment down below. No video tomorrow. We'll be back on Monday. But until then, hope you're all winners. Enjoy your weekend. Have some fun. And let's go ahead and make some money.